Marco Rubio met with the Pope today. The two of them spent about 2 hours together. Most of it was behind closed doors. It was the first meeting between a top U.S. official and the head of the Catholic Church in nearly a year. And as we all know, it comes at a tense time. And you remember Donald Trump's tense exchanges between the president and the Pope regarding Catholicism and support for the Iran war. Joining us, staff writer at The Atlantic and MS Now contributor McKay Coppins, co-host of The Weekend, and MS Now Washington reporter Jackie Alemany. Rick Stengel still with us. McKay, we have some really great polling. I'm just trying to find it on my desk regarding how Americans felt about Donald Trump going after the Pope and how they felt about him posting an image of him as Jesus. The polling shows they did not like it. Only 9% of Americans viewed it as positive, 87% viewed it as negative. And when you break it down among, political party, Republicans also didn't like it. A lot of them will say they still like Donald Trump, but a meaningful number like him less because of it. And that matters, obviously, because our elections are so marginal. Marco Rubio sent over there. He says it was for a discussion on Cuba, but how much of it is really a smoothing over of relations between the Vatican and the U.S.?
Well, of course, I think that was probably objective number one. And Marco Rubio is the one to send as a practicing Catholic who has not joined in the feud with the Pope as the vice president has. But, watching kind of the coverage of his visit, you really get the sense that his mission is sort of impossible. And that's because the Trump administration and the Vatican just, it's not just that they disagree on the war in Iran. They're speaking different languages. The Vatican doesn't have its own military. It doesn't have a foreign policy. When Trump says the Pope is weak on crime or bad on foreign policy, he's treating the Pope like a political leader or a political candidate. The Vatican's power comes from its moral authority, and from, his message on the war is rooted in theology and morality and Christianity. Trump just doesn't understand that fundamentally. His power comes from, military might in the U.S., from wielding threats on social media, from bullying, menacing. He can't understand why the Pope won't just fall in line with him. And so you have this kind of impossible situation. I thought it was really vividly illustrated in the gifts they gave to each other, where the Pope gave Marco Rubio a pen made out of olive wood, which in biblical tradition is meant to signify peace. And Rubio was sent with a crystal miniature football with the State Department insignia on it. I think that kind of sums up the disconnect between the two parties here.
And there's obviously a disconnect with Americans as well. Let me just read you this one quote, which I found pretty striking. That's putting it mildly, from the Washington Post talking to religious Americans. This is Kimberly Chopin. There is only one Jesus. I found the post to be inappropriate and offensive. Humility is at the core of being Jesus, said Kimberly Chopin, a 57-year-old Catholic who lives in suburban Baton Rouge and voted for Trump. She added that Hegseth, and Pete Hegseth's getting wrapped in this as well, the way that he's been praying at the Pentagon, his prayer calling for violence made her, quote, extremely uncomfortable. That kind of language sounds like the language of al-Qaeda. This is when Hegseth was praying for violence on our enemies. How much are you hearing discomfort in your world, McKay, with this administration? And does it feel new, different, meaningful?
It really does. And I mean, I can speak anecdotally in my reporting and my personal conversations with religious Trump supporters, religious conservatives. The depth of disapproval, dissatisfaction, disappointment with the last month of the Trump administration and the president's behavior in particular is something new to me. And it actually has started to show up in the polls. I was hesitant to talk about it from a personal standpoint, but you look at the numbers since the beginning of last year, Trump support with white evangelicals has dropped 10 points. With white Catholics, it's dropped almost 15 points. I mean, we used to, as pundits, talk about Trump's religious base as basically impenetrable, right? That he could do anything, say anything, take any position, and his religious supporters would stick with him. And it was a source of a lot of, ridicule from the left and from secular people. I think we are seeing that base start to erode. Now, I don't know. They're not going to become Democrats necessarily. I don't know what'll happen. But Trump is meaningfully losing support from religious people.
So, Jackie, is the White House still under that same thinking that operating under the same thinking that we've always had, which is that the religious base is immovable? Do they still believe that it's immovable no matter what Donald Trump does?
Katie, I think that this trip is an indication that they don't believe that and that there's some work to be done here. I mean, we had White House officials telling us last week that there was a recognition that work was needed to be done with voters. And as you are well aware, when there is a vacancy, when there is a problem, when there is something that needs smoothing over, Marco Rubio is often the person within this administration that is dispatched to take care of it. And nothing has revealed the philosophical fault lines within the MAGA movement and in the Trump administration like the war in Iran has. And when you layer over that the dust up, I believe as Rubio referred to it earlier this week in the White House press briefing, with Pope Leo over the war in Iran, that adds another layer of complications and political risk and issues that this administration and this president is dealing with, and obviously makes the trip that Rubio and his team has said was scheduled prior to issues around the war, but makes the trip that much more important for Rubio. And as McKay alluded to, I mean, Rubio has often been the person who's been dispatched to handle especially sensitive information overseas. He obviously spent 14 years in the Senate working on issues between foreign relations and the Select Committee on Intelligence, and he's handled everything so far from, the threats from Trump to seize territory of a European ally to now having to meet with Pope Leo, smooth over relations with the Catholic Church, and essentially try to deliver a more palatable message from the administration to the church. That is something that he has really excelled in. He doesn't necessarily disagree with the president, but he delivers it in a way where the message might be received more positively. We have had a brief readout right now from Rubio's team about how that meeting went. It was approximately 3 hours long, but hopefully we'll get more details on it soon.
Yeah. It is interesting that Donald Trump used to be the chief smoother over. They never really ever dispatched anybody before. Donald Trump was the only person that spoke for the administration. He was the only one that had any real authority over the MAGA base. Rubio is somebody that's ascendant within the base. We've heard a lot of focus groups that say that. And just on the subject of the Pope, in 2016, he went after the Pope. He went after the Pope it was Pope Francis at the time, I believe. I think so. And he was criticizing Trump for building a wall or criticizing the idea of walls. Mm-hmm. Remember, Donald Trump was all about build the wall. And he went after the Pope then, didn't suffer, won the election. Times have changed.
Yes, and this seems more personal. It's really not an antagonism between the Vatican and the United States. It's because
maybe Pope Leo's an American, and Americans are like, what are you doing?
And also, there's nothing that shows Trump's narcissism more than when the Pope preaches the gospel and Trump thinks he's attacking him because he doesn't know the gospel.
That's what happened with Francis.
Well, that's the same thing. Yeah. By the way, I can give a scoop about where that gift came from.
Oh, yeah, please do.
So, there are regulations and laws about how expensive gifts can be that you give from the State Department or accept. I think it's $50. And before every foreign trip, you're about to leave and you go, oh, man, there's an intern. Can you run down to the State Department gift store at the bottom of Foggy Bottom and get him some plastic cufflinks or something? I do remember that plasticine football with the State Department emblem on it. It costs about $40.
So it's not crystal?
Well, maybe. I can't. That's a state secret.
Rick, thanks for joining us. Really good to have you. Rick Stengel, Jackie Alamany, McKay Coppins. Appreciate it.